The most important text message I ever received arrived on a Thursday afternoon while I was literally on my lunch break, sitting in my car, eating a mediocre turkey sandwich from the deli downstairs. I remember the exact moment because I just hit send on a quarterly expense report, feeling that small, predictable surge of satisfaction that comes from professional closure. Then my phone buzzed. My girlfriend texted, "I'm moving in with my professor to focus on my studies. Don't be insecure." I remember reading it 3 times, the cheap mayonnaise sticking to the roof of my mouth. I replied, "Good luck with that." Then, I forwarded her text to his wife along with the apartment lease she'd asked me to co-sign. Her career opportunity vanished within 48 hours. My name is Aaron. I was 27 at the time, and for 4 years, my life had been built on a foundation of meticulously planned stability, corporate accounting, an 8 to 5 routine, and a small but predictable savings account. I lived by the belief that if you maintain perfect control over your external world, your finances, your schedule, your logic, you could prevent catastrophic emotional betrayal. Trust, in my experience, was a structural weakness. Chloe, my girlfriend of 2.5 years, was 25 and finishing her master's in psychology at a decent state university. Her text, which I can only describe as the most delusional message I'd ever received, was a torpedo aimed directly at my belief system. "Hey babe, so I've been thinking, and I've decided to move in with Dr. Vance for a while. It's purely academic. He's mentoring me on my thesis, and this will help me focus. His guest house is perfect for studying. Don't be insecure about this. It's a career opportunity. Love you." I put the sandwich down. The air conditioning hummed, but my blood felt cold. I read it again, the words floating off the screen, ridiculous and insulting. I was waiting for the punchline, the follow-up text that admitted it was a terrible joke. It never came. For the past 6 months, she'd been increasingly consumed by her thesis advisor, Dr. Thomas Vance, a 48-year-old married man with salt and pepper hair and what she called distinguished energy. Their interactions had slowly bled into our relationship like a slow poison. There were late night emergency consultations that somehow required her to dress up. There were dinners to discuss her research that always seemed to happen at wine bars. There were weekend conferences that mysteriously only the two of them attended. Twice I had voiced my concerns, only to be dismissed with cold authority. "He's a professor. He's married. He has kids practically my age. You are being absolutely ridiculous and honestly kind of insulting." Each time, I retreated, swallowing the bitter pill of her dismissal. I chose to believe her lied. That I was the paranoid, controlling idiot, because it was less painful than accepting the truth of the betrayal. I stopped asking questions out loud and started paying attention instead. The way she angled her phone away when texting, the expensive cologne scent that did not belong to me after her study sessions, the constant, patronizing reassurance that our relationship was solid, just boring. But the single, most critical piece of data that shattered the illusion had arrived 3 days before the infamous text. She had asked me to sign a lease for her. She claimed she had found a great studio apartment near campus. $850 a month. That would help her finish her thesis in peace. She needed a co-signer because her credit wasn't great. I had told her I needed to think about it. Signing a lease is a massive financial commitment that could destroy my credit if things went sideways, and protecting my credit was a core tenet of my existence. Now, She was telling me she was moving into a professor's guest house. Something was mathematically, logically, and financially wrong with the equation. My focus shifted from the emotional insult to the structural breach. This wasn't just infidelity. This felt like an elaborate construction of deception aimed squarely at me. I picked up my phone one last time, my logical mind asserting control over my churning stomach. I sent the brief, dismissive reply, "Good luck with that." I started the engine, leaving the mediocre turkey sandwich uneaten, and headed home. The puzzle wasn't solved yet, but I had all the pieces, and I knew exactly where to start digging. I drove home from the office parking lot with a singular, clinical focus. The emotional shock of Chloe's text had faded, replaced by the grim satisfaction of a mystery needing to be solved. My ghost, the fear of being seen as the easily duped one, flared up. The only way to silence that doubt was with irrefutable data. The puzzle centered entirely on the lease. If she was moving into a free guest house, why had she urgently pushed me to sign an $850 monthly lease just 3 days earlier? The two facts were mutually exclusive. The discrepancy was the whole in her meticulously crafted deception. I pulled up the digital lease agreement she had forwarded to my personal email. It was a standard 2-year residential lease for a property near the university. The landlord's name was listed generically as Campus Investments, LLC, but the physical address was concrete. I sat down at my desk, my laptop open. My career is corporate accounting. Research and data validation are my core strengths. I navigated to the county assessor's public records website, a free, publicly accessible database that documents every property deed transfer in the region. It took less than 20 minutes of methodical searching. I plugged in the physical address from the lease agreement. The results loaded, and the name listed under current property owner hit me with the force of an actual physical blow, yet I felt only a cold, hard clarity. The owner was not Campus Investments, LLC. The owner was Vance, Thomas, and Eleanor. Dr. Thomas Vance, and his wife, Eleanor. I leaned back, taking a slow, deep breath, letting the monstrous audacity of the scheme sink in. She wasn't moving into his guest house. She was moving into a 2-bedroom condo, which public records indicated the Vances had purchased as an investment property 2 years prior. And she needed me, Aaron, the stable, boring boyfriend with impeccable credit, to sign that lease. I realized the genius and the cruelty of the plan. If I had signed it, I would have guaranteed $850 a month for 24 months for a property owned by the very married man she was moving in with. The rent money would have gone directly back into his pocket, effectively subsidizing his affair, while I carried the risk. If the affair fell apart, if the professor realized his mistake, or if his wife found out, Chloe would have been forced out, but I would have been legally obligated to cover the payments for a property I never lived in. She wanted a financial safety net made of my credit score, and she had lied straight to my face about the entire arrangement. My initial anger transmuted into a powerful, icy resolve. This was not just a case of infidelity, it was a premeditated financial attack. I was no longer a hurt boyfriend. I was a potential victim of fraud who had narrowly dodged a catastrophic financial commitment. I shut down the property records site and opened LinkedIn. Finding Dr. Thomas Vance's profile was easy. Below his prestigious university title, I located his wife, Eleanor Vance, hospital administrator at a large regional medical center. She looked professional, accomplished, serious. A woman of structure and consequence. It took another 5 minutes to find her work email via the hospital's public directory. I wrote the email carefully, stripping away all emotion and commentary, presenting only the raw, undeniable facts. Hi, Eleanor Vance. I am sorry to contact you this way, but I thought you should know. My girlfriend, Chloe Smith, has been having an inappropriate relationship with your husband, Dr. Thomas Vance. She just informed me she is moving into your investment property to focus on her studies. She also asked me to sign the lease for this property, which I now understand you and your husband own. I reread it, checking for anything that could be interpreted as a threat or emotional outburst. It was clean. Pure information delivery. I have attached screenshots of her text to me and the lease agreement she forwarded. I am sorry to be the bearer of bad news. I attached the two crucial files, the text message and the lease PDF, and then, without allowing myself a moment of doubt or regret, I hit send. The instant the email was gone, I felt my heart drop into my stomach, then rebound with a strange lightness. The truth was out of my control. The data had been delivered. I immediately went to my contacts and blocked Chloe's number. I was finished talking to her. I was finished listening to her lies. I put my laptop away and sat in the quiet apartment, the cold satisfaction of definitive action, mixing with a quiet dread of the coming storm. But at least, I was no longer blind. The next 48 hours would be chaos, but it would be chaos of their own making, not mine. The 48 hours that followed sending the email were strangely muted on my end, like watching a fire through soundproof glass. I went to work on Friday. I was physically present, signing off on accounts and checking spreadsheets, but mentally, I was coiled tight, waiting for the blast. The first response came quickly, less than 24 hours after my email hit Eleanor Vance's inbox. It was short, professional, and delivered to my work address. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I appreciate your honesty, and I am sorry you are dealing with this situation as well. That was it. No drama, no threats, no demands for more information. Just acknowledgement from a highly competent woman who understood exactly what I had delivered evidence. Her calm professionalism, contrasting with Chloe's inevitable theatrics, gave me a surge of unexpected validation. The problem was no longer mine to solve. The chaos, however, began to bleed through my self-imposed silence. I had only blocked Chloe's main number, forgetting that she had access to my social media. All day Friday, my Instagram direct messages were blowing up. Initially, they were confused. Why aren't you answering? Then, they escalated to anger and denial. We need to talk. You are seriously overreacting. And finally, the message that confirmed her total lack of perspective, a message I still keep saved as a perfect artifact of delusion. This doesn't have to change anything between us, lol. Lol. Got me. She genuinely believed her calculated betrayal and attempt at financial entrapment could be brushed off as a silly misunderstanding. Around 8 o'clock Friday night, the expected occurred. I was in the kitchen, focused on the comfort of routine, making myself spaghetti carbonara. I like the precise timing and chemical balance of that dish. I heard the lock turn. She still had her key, a massive lapse in my security protocols. Chloe walked in, framed by the hallway light. She was shaking with anger, her face red, her eyes wild, her appearance totally out of sync with the calm, savory smell of eggs, cheese, and cured pork fat filling the air. What did you do? She hissed, her voice low but laced with frantic rage. Pasta? I said, stirring the sauce with deliberate slowness. Want some? You contacted his wife. Do you have any idea what you have done? I set the wooden spatula down carefully on the side of the pan, giving the action a dramatic finality. I turned around slowly, crossing my arms over my chest, informed her that her husband is sleeping with his graduate student and planning to move her into their shared investment property. Yes, Chloe, I understand what I did. We were not sleeping together! It was mentorship! Academic collaboration! She spat, denying the physical aspect with too much passion. You were moving into an apartment he owns. You asked me to co-sign the lease, so I would be financially responsible if you defaulted. You told me not to be insecure about you literally living with a married man. Pick a story and stick with it. The undeniable facts hit her, and she crumpled, switching tactics instantly. She began to cry, the full production die ugly crying, mascara running down her cheeks, hiccuping sobs. You have ruined everything! His wife is making him cut all contact with me. I might lose my thesis advisor. My entire academic career could be over because you couldn't handle your jealousy! I looked at the weeping, hysterical woman in my kitchen, smelling the carbonara and the bitter scent of her manufactured panic. Sounds like consequences, I stated, my voice flat. How can you be so cold about this? You tried to use me as a financial backup plan while you moved in with another man. You lied to my face for months about the nature of your relationship. And when I finally figured out what was happening, your response was, don't be insecure. So yes, I am cold right now. I am ice cold. You need to leave your key on the counter and get out of my apartment. She tried one last approach, softening her voice and walking toward me, her eyes pleading. Baby, I made a mistake. I got confused. He was paying attention to me, making me feel special about my work, telling me I was brilliant. Your work, right? Is that what we are calling it now? Nothing physical happened. I swear on my mother's life. I genuinely do not care if it did or didn't at this point. The intent was clearly there. The lies were definitely there. The attempt to financially trap me was absolutely there. We are done. This relationship is over. She went nuclear, screaming about how I was controlling and pathetic, threatened by her intelligence and her connection with someone who actually appreciated her mind. It was the classic cycle. Denny, attack, reverse victim and offender. I just stood there with my arms crossed, waiting for the tantrum to run its course. Kay countered door, I said when she finally paused to gasp for air. Pick an order. She threw the key at my head, missing by a couple of feet, and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. I didn't move until I heard her car screech away. I was drained, but the control had held. I took a deep, steadying breath and returned to my perfect, unadulterated bowl of spaghetti carbonara. The very next morning, I called a locksmith. It cost $180 for the Saturday call-out fee, but replacing the entire locking mechanism was the most satisfying financial decision I had made all year. That small, physical act finalized the psychological separation from Chloe. The cold, mechanical click of the new lock felt like an actual barrier against chaos. But the expulsion of Chloe only cleared the decks for the next wave of collateral damage. The entitlement was deep, seated, running through her entire social sphere. Sunday afternoon, I was cleaning up when there was a tentative knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman I recognized instantly, Chloe's mother. I had met her maybe 4 times over the 2.5 years. She had that standard, suburban mom energy, always bringing store-bought cookies to holiday dinners. I opened the door, leaning casually against the frame, keeping my body language relaxed despite the rising tension. "We need to talk about what you did to my daughter," she said, skipping any social pleasantries. "What I did? You humiliated her. You could have handled this like an adult, privately. Instead, you went to that man's wife and destroyed my daughter's entire academic future out of spite." Her voice was low and trembling with fury. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but my accountant brain kept my tone even and factual. Your daughter was having an affair with a married man and tried to get me to sign a lease on his property without telling me who owned it. That is borderline fraud. I did not destroy anything. I just turned the lights on. She shifted, momentarily thrown by the word fraud. She says nothing physical happened between them. It was mentorship. Then she has absolutely nothing to worry about, right? If it was all innocent academic mentorship, like she claims, I am sure the university investigation will clear everything right up. Her face went completely white. The color drained from her cheeks as if I had pulled a plug. What investigation? Ah. So Chloe hadn't shared that part of the fallout yet. Interesting. The one his wife, Eleanor Vance, apparently reported to the Title IX office. Something about inappropriate relationships between faculty and graduate students. There's a whole university policy about it. I am sure they take it pretty seriously. I had no actual confirmation of the Title IX report, only the implication from Eleanor's cold acknowledgement email, but the reaction from Chloe's mother confirmed its impact. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a combination of shock and accusation. She couldn't argue with the academic and financial repercussions I had calmly laid out. She couldn't dispute the policy. She just turned, without another word, and walked back to her car, looking utterly defeated, like she had seen a ghost. The conversation provided two immediate benefits. It validated my method of dealing with the truth, and it created a necessary wedge between Chloe and her immediate support system. The following day, a quiet, unexpected invitation arrived in my inbox. It was from Eleanor Vance. She asked if we could meet for coffee. I was hesitant. I had delivered the bomb, and my involvement was supposed to end there. But she had been the only truly dignified person in this entire mess. I agreed. We met at a quiet coffee shop near my office. She was exactly what I had pegged her as, composed, professionally dressed, and clearly exhausted. The dark circles under her eyes suggested the kind of tired that sleep couldn't touch. I wanted to thank you properly, she said, after we were seated with our drinks. Aren't apologize for the mess this has caused in your life. You do not need to apologize to me. You are a victim here. Too, maybe, she conceded, stirring her coffee slowly. But I also stayed willfully blind for longer than I should have. This was not his first indiscretion. Just the first one I couldn't ignore or explain away. She told me about their 22 years of marriage, their 2 kids in college. She had suspected other students, but never had concrete, undeniable proof. My email, with its clear, factual evidence, the text and the lease, was the thread that finally unraveled everything. The lease, she repeated, shaking her head in disgust. The property is in both our names. He was going to move his mistress into our investment condo and somehow convinced her to get someone else to guarantee the payments. That way, if the relationship ended badly, we wouldn't even be on the hook financially. The layers of deception in that plan alone. She confirmed the Title IX report. I reported him the moment I confirmed the property ownership. That is a clear abuse of power and university resources. She also mentioned that Chloe had contacted her, the previous week, screaming about how Eleanor had ruined her life by reporting him to the university. She also threatened to sue me for defamation. Eleanor said, a hint of steel in her voice. I had my lawyer send her a very detailed letter explaining what defamation actually requires and how truth is an absolute defense. I haven't heard from her since. I realized then that Eleanor Vance was my perfect, logical counterpoint to Chloe's chaos. She had a spine made of steel under all that professional composure. The alliance, though strange and unexpected, felt right. I had validated her instincts, and she had validated mine. The cleanup operation was underway. The days that followed the meeting with Eleanor Vance were quiet on the surface, but the waves of consequence were still churning beneath. The professor's wife had handled the high-level legal and university action. Now it was time for me to deal with the low-level, intensely personal retaliation. Chloe's entitlement was so absolute. She genuinely believed I had caused her misfortune, and she was determined to make me pay for her own mistakes. The first wave of attack was physical. Last Tuesday evening, there was a heavy, insistent knocking at my door. When I opened it, I was faced with Chloe's brother. He was a big guy, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, clearly there to intimidate. He skipped straight to the demand. My sister needs the security deposit back from your place, he stated, stepping too close into my personal space. What security deposit? I asked, forcing myself to remain stationary in the doorway. The one she put down when she moved in with you. I actually laughed out loud, a short, sharp burst of disbelief. Your sister never paid a security deposit. I've lived here alone for 4 years. She is not on my lease, she never paid rent, she never contributed to utilities. There is no security deposit because she was never officially a tenant. She lied to you too. Seems to be a pattern with her, honestly. He became aggressive, his face darkening. Look, man, she's completely broke right now. She can't even afford her rent anymore because of what you did. You owe her something? I do not owe her a single thing, I replied, my voice steady. And if you do not leave my property in the next 30 seconds, I am calling the cops. He hesitated, then unleashed his frustration by punching the wall in my hallway hard enough to leave a shallow but visible dent. He stomped out, but not before my neighbor across the hall opened her door, saw the whole exchange, and immediately offered to be a witness. Good neighbors, I realized, are truly priceless. The second wave of retaliation was an attempt at professional sabotage. I work in corporate accounting, stable, predictable, and heavily governed by human resources policy. I got called into my manager's office on Thursday. Someone contacted human resources about you, Aaron, he said, looking uncomfortable. Anonymous complaint. Said you have been harassing a graduate student and interfering with her academic career. My stomach dropped, swiftly followed by a cold, searing rage. Let me guess, I said. They did not leave any details about how I supposedly did this. No, very vague complaint, just accusations. I decided total transparency was the only defense. I laid out the entire situation, the affair, the financial scheme, the property ownership evidence. I showed him the original lease and the text from Chloe telling me not to be insecure. My manager, to his credit, listened to everything without judgment. Sounds like someone's trying to cause problems for you, he concluded. I am going to document this conversation and note that the complaint appears to be retaliatory. Human Resources is not going to do anything with something this vague anyway. A bullet dodged, but only barely. They would escalate, I knew it. The third wave, was the most brazenly entitled. I received an actual letter in the mail, physical paper, from her father, 3 handwritten pages full of moralizing about family values and forgiveness, claiming I had destroyed his little girl's dreams. The letter formally demanded that I write a letter to the university, apologizing, clearing Chloe's name, and stating that I had made up the affair out of jealousy. He wanted me to commit perjury, essentially to shield his daughter from the consequences she had earned. I did not respond, but I filed the letter in my documentation folder, evidence of harassment if the need arose. The fourth wave was the ultimate demonstration of her complete lack of self-awareness. Last Saturday, around 11 p.m., my ex showed up at my apartment building. The security camera in the lobby caught her, trying to talk someone into letting her in. When that failed, she sat on the front steps, crying loudly for almost an hour until a neighbor threatened to call the police. She left a letter under the main door, addressed to me. 6 pages of absolute, spiraling delusion. I read the highlights in stunned silence. You were supposed to support me through everything, not destroy me when things got complicated. The relationship with Dr. Vance was about intellectual connection, something you could never understand. If you had just signed the lease like I asked, none of this would have happened. You have stolen my future, and I will never forgive you for that. The complete, total, unyielding belief that she was the victim, that her attempt to financially trap me was merely a simple request for support, was truly breathtaking. It reinforced every boundary I had set. I documented everything, kept every screenshot, every letter, every time stamp. My resolve was ironclad. She was escalating, but I was prepared to meet every single attempt with cold, factual resistance. I was not going to break, and I was not going to let her win the narrative. The wave of retaliatory harassment from Chloe and her family finally subsided after the father's letter and the desperate midnight visit. The quiet that followed was the sound of institutions working. While I was fighting off threats in my hallway and in my HR department, Eleanor Vance was ensuring that the structural integrity of Dr. Vance's career was compromised. About 3 weeks after I sent that initial email, the full consequences of the truth began to solidify. The university investigation concluded their preliminary review. It was not good for the professor. They did not just find an isolated incident, they found a pattern. My ex-girlfriend was not Dr. Vance's first student mentee with suspicious circumstances. The investigation unearthed at least 2 others over the past decade, though those women wisely declined to participate in the formal proceedings. You could hardly blame them. It is terrifying to challenge a powerful figure in your field. The university acted decisively. Dr. Vance was suspended, pending the full hearing. He was not technically fired yet, but his name was scrubbed from the department website. His graduate students were reassigned to other faculty, and his professional world vanished overnight. The academic grapevine, according to Eleanor, was absolutely on fire with gossip. Chloe was left in complete academic limbo. The university would not allow her to continue working with a professor suspended for abuse of power, obviously. Finding a new thesis advisor mid-program, particularly for a master's, is an absolute nightmare under normal circumstances. Most faculty do not want to inherit another professor's student, and nobody, absolutely nobody, wanted to inherit a student wrapped up in an academic scandal of this magnitude. Her prestigious path was over. But the personal climax of the affair unfolded in Eleanor Vance's divorce proceedings. We met for coffee again, several weeks after the university's preliminary decision. She was calmer this time, the strain still visible but overlaid with a new, quiet determination. "It is over," she told me simply, stirring her black coffee. "The divorce is moving quickly. We had a prenup, and thankfully, it had an ironclad infidelity clause, which your evidence made undeniable." She detailed the resolution with the same clinical precision I used in my expense reports. She was keeping the main family house, getting primary custody of their younger kid who was still technically a dependent for college purposes, and securing a significant portion of his retirement accounts. Her lawyer, she confirmed, was excellent. Then came the detail that provided the perfect, cold satisfaction. "He gets the condo," she said, naming the two-bedroom investment property. The one he was planning to install Chloe in. There was some kind of sick poetry in that. Dr. Vance, stripped of his career prestige and half his fortune, would be left with the physical asset that defined his calculated deception. He used that condo to facilitate his scheme, and now it was his sole, bitter consolation prize in the wake of his marriage and professional ruin. I realized then that by acting decisively, I had not only protected my financial integrity, but had actively helped Eleanor Vance reclaim her own future. I had been driven by the need to prove my instincts were valid, to overcome my ghost of being the duped victim. And the fallout proved that my high alert status was justified. The betrayal had not broken me, it had armed me. The professor's downfall removed the largest structural obstacle for both of us. The next step was personal closure, both for Eleanor and for me. "He blames everyone but himself, of course," Eleanor said, glancing at her phone. "He still claims I overreacted and that Chloe manipulated him into the lease idea. He has no internal sense of responsibility. That, I thought, was precisely why men like him never truly change. They are fundamentally incapable of self-reflection." "What about the defamation threat?" I asked. "Completely dropped it. My lawyer's letter was thorough. The truth is an absolute defense, as I told you." We finished our coffee. The alliance we had formed, strange as it was genuinely meaningful. I walked away from that meeting feeling lighter, the weight of the professor's influence fully removed from my life. The storm of consequences had been a necessary cleansing, and both Eleanor and I were stronger for having weathered it. I had proven that self-respect was indeed the ultimate armor against manipulation. The final, painful piece of the cleanup was still waiting, however. I knew I needed to separate myself entirely from Chloe's narrative of victimhood, and that meant one last encounter. The final act of closure came not through a calculated plan, but through the random, brutal chance of daily life. About a month after the professor's resignation, I was visiting a friend near my old neighborhood and stopped at a large grocery store to pick up drinks. I was browsing the refrigerated aisle when I saw her. Chloe. She was standing in the checkout line ahead of me. I tried to duck away immediately, but the aisle was narrow, and she turned her head just as I was retreating. I had not seen her up close since the night of the carbonara confrontation. The difference was startling. The designer clothes were gone, replaced with practical, worn items. The confident, high-shouldered posture had deflated into something smaller, almost hunched. She looked genuinely exhausted, carrying the physical weight of consequence. She saw me, and her expression flickered through 5 different emotions: shock, fear, anger, and finally, a desperate kind of pleading. "Aaron," she said, her voice thin, "can we talk for a minute, please?" Against my better judgment, Against every warning bell, my newly vigilant instincts were screaming. I agreed. I needed to see if she had crossed the line from denial into accountability. Fine, I said. Outside. 5 minutes. We stepped out into the bright, cold glare of the parking lot. The anonymity of the location was a good, neutral backdrop for what needed to be said. She started immediately, launching into what I assumed was supposed to be an apology, but it quickly devolved into self-pity. I know I messed up badly. She began, twisting her hands together. The whole thing with him. I got lost. He made me feel like I was special, like my work actually mattered, like I was going somewhere important. Your work does matter, Chloe. I interjected, keeping my voice level. That wasn't actually about your work, though. She flinched. I know that now. But you didn't have to blow up my entire life like that. You could have just broken up with me quietly. And there it was. The moment I had been waiting for. The undeniable proof that the chaos of the last 6 weeks had taught her nothing about responsibility, only about the inconvenience of consequences. She still believed the method of the breakup was the problem, not the crime that necessitated it. You asked me to sign a lease on his property without telling me who owned it. I said, leaning in slightly, delivering the words with the force of an accounting summation. Do you understand what would have happened if I had signed that document? If things went wrong between you two, I would be legally responsible for an $850 monthly payment for an apartment I did not live in, owned by a man you were sleeping with. You tried to financially trap me as your backup plan. I was not trying to trap you, she cried, desperation entering her voice. I just needed options. Security. You needed a safety net made out of my credit score and bank account while you went off to play house with your married professor. That is not confusion or insecurity. That is cold, callous calculation. She started crying again, a quieter, more desperate sound than the theatrical sobs of the night she left. I loved you, Aaron. I still do, in some ways. Can't you understand that? You had a really strange way of showing it, I replied. Everything got so complicated so fast. He was going to leave his wife eventually. We had actual plans together. He was never going to leave his wife, I stated, drawing on the wisdom of Eleanor Vance's brutal honesty. Men like that never do. You were convenient until you were not. She flinched as if I had struck her. The denial was failing, but the self-pity remained fierce. I just wanted you to know I am genuinely sorry for all of it, she mumbled, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. And I know you won't believe me, but nothing physical happened until the last couple of months. Before that, it really was mostly emotional. That honestly does not make it better. Chloe, I know. She looked at me, struggling with the final, terrible question. Do you think you will ever be able to forgive me? I thought about it for a long, quiet moment, considering the depth of the betrayal, the months of gaslighting, the sheer audacity of the Lease scheme, and the subsequent attacks from her family. Forgiveness felt like a debt I was still unwilling to pay. Maybe someday I just won't think about it anymore. I told her. That is the most honest answer I can give you. She nodded slowly, accepting that finality. The 5 minutes were up. We went our separate ways in the parking lot. I watched her walk back toward her battered car, her shoulders still slumped. I felt no triumph, no residual anger, just a profound, cold sense of closure. The relationship was not just over, it was fully accounted for, the books closed, and the lesson learned. I had protected myself, and I had earned my peace. So, where does that leave me now 6 months later? I am doing okay. Not great, not terrible, just okay. I am in that stage of recovery where stability feels like a victory. The most valuable long-term consequence of the whole mess has been therapy. It turns out being systematically gaslit and manipulated for months does a real number on your ability to trust your own judgment and instincts. I spent so long fearing I was the paranoid, controlling idiot that my internal compass broke. My therapist, however, says I am making solid progress on rebuilding that trust. I am learning that my instincts, the ones screaming about the expensive cologne and the suspicious lease, were right all along. They were simply being overridden by my fear of confrontation and my belief that trust was a dangerous weakness. Now, I am learning that trust in my own perception is a necessary strength. My work life is stable. I got a small promotion last month. Nothing earth-shattering, but it came with a decent raise and a better office. The human resources complaint never materialized into anything. It was filed and dismissed as the transparent act of retaliation it was. My manager's support validated my decision to prioritize transparency and facts. Dating? Not really. I tried one of those apps for about 2 weeks, but I kept overanalyzing every single message and interaction, looking for hidden meanings and financial red flags. It was not healthy behavior. I deleted the apps. Maybe in a few more months, when I feel more solid in my own footing. Right now, focusing on self-respect is the priority. The professor, Dr. Vance, faced the full weight of his consequences. Last I heard from Eleanor, who I still grab coffee with occasionally. A weird friendship, but she truly is good people. He took a position at some tiny, no-name liberal arts college in the middle of nowhere. It came with a massive pay cut, zero prestige, and was basically academic exile. He is reportedly bitter about everything, blaming everyone but himself for how things turned out, which confirms his enduring lack of self-reflection. I, on the other hand, finally had the dent in my hallway wall patched and painted. It felt necessary to erase that final physical trace of the chaos. Eleanor, meanwhile, is thriving. Her divorce is nearly final. She kept the kids in the house, and she got the financial security she deserved. She is the true success story here, the one who demonstrated the power of decisive, professional action in the face of betrayal. As for Chloe, her situation stabilized somewhat, but not comfortably. She managed to find a new thesis advisor at a smaller program about 2 hours from here. She had to basically transfer and restart significant portions of her research. Her funding was pulled because it was tied to Dr. Vance's grants, so she is paying out of pocket now. According to the few mutual friends who stayed neutral, she had to move back in with her parents while she finishes her degree because she could not afford rent anymore. The commute to her new program is brutal. The coffee shop job pays barely above minimum wage. She apparently complains constantly about how unfair life is and how I destroyed everything she had worked for. A small, fleeting part of me feels something like sympathy for her. Very small. Then I remember the calculated lease scheme, the months of lies, the blatant gaslighting, the phrase, "Don't be insecure," and the feeling passes pretty quickly. She is paying a high price for her choices, but she made those choices fully aware of the moral cost. Some folks who followed the initial posts of this story asked if I regretted sending that email, if I felt guilty about the professor losing his career, his marriage falling apart, or my ex's academic future being derailed. Honestly, no, I do not. I did not create this situation. I just refuse to be complicit in it. I refuse to be the financial safety net while someone else got the emotional and professional benefits. I refused to keep questioning my own sanity when my instincts were screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. The professor made his choices over and over again for years. My ex made hers repeatedly for months, culminating in a premeditated financial attack on me. The wife deserved to know the truth about what was happening in her own marriage, and I deserved to not be used as a financial patsy. That is not revenge. That is simply refusing to be a doormat. Although, I will not pretend that watching that whole house of cards collapse in 48 hours was not genuinely satisfying on some deep justice seeking level. Anyway, thanks for following along. The records have been balanced, the liabilities have been cleared, and the account is closed. Time to close this chapter and figure out what comes next.